Jimmy Kimmel has been reinstated. Jimmy Kimmel Live, which was never canceled, was suspended. Production was suspended indefinitely. Now, when you put the word indefinitely on it, that is the spin problem, because that sounds like that could last forever. It's like when a band goes on permanent hiatus or whatever it's called. It's like, it just feels like a version of not saying we're broken up. Now, Jimmy Kimmel returns tonight, but sort of the big swerve is that both Nexstar and Sinclair Broadcasting, which again holds a massive amount of the affiliates, which is actually what you're watching. When you're watching ABC in your local market, you are not watching ABC. You're watching ABC programming on an affiliate station. And the reason I present the question of is it a PR stunt is that, once again, no one was really talking about these shows until they announced Stephen Colbert was going to go off the air next year. And ABC very likely could have been like, you know what? We need a little bit of that. We need a little bit of that love that's coming in. I'm not saying that's what happened, but maybe even the Jimmy Kimmel producers said that and said, you know, what's going to happen here? What can we do to kind of get some people paying attention to the show we're doing right now? You know, that's the conversation that's happening. Maybe they decided, let's push it over the line a little bit more in the wake of the Charlie Kirk tragedy. What can we do to get people interested? Because you know what? I'll be honest, and if you're being honest with yourself, there's a good chance you would at least watch that opening monologue tonight if it was available in your region, in your household. A lot of you won't have it, but there's a lot of you that would have. Ratings will spike tonight. They did have a lot of backlash within Hollywood, a real protest to the streets. So a lot of people said, this is what finally got you to protest? Not, October 7th, not any of these things. What got you to protest was a show you likely didn't watch was getting taken off the air temporarily.
That's right. And when you look at the reaction, how widespread it was in the entertainment industry about Jimmy Kimmel being taken off the air, the silencing of his free speech, one, all that was ridiculous. But also, if the Trump administration silenced Jimmy Kimmel, are they responsible for bringing him back? I'm very confused about how this fascism that they allege works when he's joining the lineup again tonight.
But when you're talking about political commentary, that is what those shows had become, whether it was Stephen Colbert or Jimmy Kimmel, and to a lesser extent, but still Jimmy Fallon, where it felt like he was pressured into doing it.
Who follows him was exactly the same as the others.
I think it's unwatchable because of how much it is just a political commentary show at 12:30 at night.
Right. But I think this is interesting because, as you mentioned, Nexstar and Sinclair, that's about 25% of the TV viewership audience just between those two networks of affiliates. That is a big portion of the country. That's a big portion of ad revenue. Obviously, Disney is going to see, and ABC is going to see, probably the biggest ratings they've had in a long time for his show. I would even expect with that 25% chunk taken out, because I don't know how many people in those markets were watching it in general. We know that the ratings were low. It wasn't doing great. There was only about 220,000 in the demo that were watching. I feel like they can make that up in Los Angeles alone tonight with the Solidarity watchers that are going to be doing it. And I do think, though, as it exploded into this whole discussion of free speech, we were critical of the comments that the FCC chairman said. We traditionally are more anti-FCC in general about government overreach
in terms of content.
Right.
I think of content moderation, the FCC at this point is virtually worthless. I think it's a waste of money, probably waste of tens of millions of dollars. If you're looking for a place to cut, it is a good place to start looking. Now, do I think the FCC serves a good purpose? Yes, because there are things like air traffic control, the way that the sound is, and the way we connect on different things. There's a lot of things in terms of communications that do need some government assistance and make oversight, because for our own safety.
Right.
I believe that is 100%. What I'm talking about is a group of people listening to the radio and watching television and deciding what is good and what is bad, what is moral and what is immoral, because the line is so blurry. This is not the 1950s. This is not the 1960s. What they're allowed to do on terrestrial television, over-the-air television, or whatever you want to call it, the basic networks, is so far and beyond maybe why the FCC had this in the first place. I mean, remember, you go back in just our lifetime, not our lifetime, but our parents' lifetime, Lucy and Ricky slept in separate beds. That's how extreme it was. And a lot of that was regulation.
Right.
was what was decent on the air. I've always side on away from censorship, but I also don't like the idea of the government getting involved. They've gotten involved a lot in religious broadcasting over the years. I was talking to one of my friends, you know his name, a longtime family in Christian television. And he said, yeah, his family had to go talk to the FCC so much in the 80s, the amount of money they had to waste because they were just trying at that point talk about Jesus on the air. That is what happens when the shoe is on the other foot.
That's exactly why we pushed back against things like the fairness doctrine for so long as an organization, is because the heavy hand of government wasn't wielded even-handedly. It was going after mostly religious broadcasters and trying to force religious broadcasters to showcase the other points of view about faith. I think it disproves the theory that this was the FCC putting pressure on Disney, the fact that he's going back on air today.
Yeah, I think
it was 100% a business decision for them.
Right. If this was a decision that you could say, you could draw a direct correlation to the government overreach and government doing this, sure, I think there could be something that could be said there. However, it was not that. I don't think the FCC should have commented. But at the end of the day, it was a corporate decision by Disney. And now it's going to be a corporate decision on how they're going to distribute this broadcast. What are the rules and regulations? If it's blacked out in your market, can they put it on Disney Plus? Can they put it on a free streaming service? I know that they were being put on there later on, clips and things and full shows later on. But what about, you'd say the live airing? It's not live, but the live airing. That's going to open up another door. And is that what tries to get people to go? I know they've talked about that with shows like Saturday Night Live, where maybe they would move exclusively to a Peacock platform for NBC to drive numbers up for Peacock, and because they didn't really want to have to deal with the censors and everything that was going into what was this late night comedy show that are made, by the way, in rapid speed. Most of them written the same day. So you got to imagine dealing with standards and practices is not easy. So if you can move it to a streamer, you better believe they will, just in terms of, but you have to have the audience. And that's the big deal. But, I watched recently, Peacock launched their version of a new spinoff of The Office.
The Paper.
Enjoyed it. However, what was shocking to me, and this is maybe the prudish of me, is the language in it is of an R-rated movie. But you're coming off of almost building a brand on a PG-13-ish.
What can be on TV. Right.
What can be on TV. So it feels like what could be on TV. Our brains are accustomed to this.
Right.
Like a sitcom having, words that we're not used to hearing. But that's just me talking as a consumer, by the way, not as the government.